Hello, YouTube Pipers. Long time no chat. Double O Pipe here, aka Rick. And I think it's about time that I posted another video. Right now, I wanted to play with my Rossi Sera, S-E-R-A, because I haven't smoked this pipe in a while. And in it, I put J.M. Boswell's Christmas Cookie. 'Tis the season. Feels like I sucked all the moisture out of my mouth pulling on that smoke so much. There, now I can taste it somewhat. I made a cup of coffee to go with it this time instead of a soft drink. So, today is December 7th. Besides being the day that the Japanese hit Pearl Harbor, it was my favorite aunt's birthday today. She passed on a few years ago. When I was a little boy, we moved into the house next door to her, so that I grew up with my cousins. I've spoken about Hayne before. He was my cousin who had to live in a wheelchair. Because of a congenital defect. I remember their house always had a Christmas tree in the front room. At the window, there were two windows on the front. There was a porch beyond that. And their Christmas tree was always very pretty. Always lit up at night, so drivers by in the evening could see the decorations. But I think I want to talk about the first Christmas I really remember. And I have a problem. I don't know if it was 1950 or 1951, because my dad brought us here in 1949 in December. And my uncle picked us up in New York when the boat stopped and let us off. And I was 3 years old, and I wasn't really forming memories too well at 3 years old, so I remember meeting my Uncle Clyde first time. He was 6, and we sat in the back seat with my mother. and he opened up a box of balloons and started blowing them up. And I remember the colors, and I remember playing with them. And that's my only memory of when we first arrived in America. But right away, Clyde and I were forming a bond. And the next year was 1950. I don't remember anything about 1950 other than a family meeting at my grandmother's house. Excuse me. And my dad had just bought a 1950 Ford, and the color was chartreuse. And I remember the color of that car, and I remember sitting on the hood and pictures being taken of us. That must have been like Thanksgiving or something, because we always had family gatherings at my grandmother's house every year at Thanksgiving, and, well, not at that time, because the family would go to Georgia. To gather at my great-grandmother's farm, where Clyde and I had many an adventure. And like I say, I'm not sure if this was 1950 or 1951, because I turned 4 in February, and I remember that meeting at my grandparents' with Dad's Ford. And it seems like it had to have been that year, though maybe it was because it was it made such an impression on me. I don't know. But we went to my grandmother, or my great-grandmother's farm near Springfield, Georgia, which is a little to the west of Savannah, I believe. I remember going across an old wooden bridge in that car, because the sound of the wood beneath us as we drove across made such a sound that I had never heard before. I think also I was afraid, since it was wood, that we'd fall through into a shallow creek beneath it. At any rate, we drove up to my grandmother's, and we parked across the street. It was just an old dirt road. I think they owned all the land around for acres, because they farmed. Clyde was already there, I think, so I ran up to the house first time. And he must have met me or something, because he was pointing out all kinds of things to me. There was the barn that was to the left and back of the house, fenced in. There was a well bricked up with a covering and a bucket on a roller that you let down into it. He told me that his brother one year fell into the well, and they had to send a rope down to him so they could get him out. Oh, jeepers. And then there was the smokehouse behind the house on the right, and the cane. Well, it was two big barrels that you'd shove sugar cane through, and there was a pole which attached to, I don't know whether, I don't, they may have had a horse, I don't know, but whatever the animal was they hooked to it, it would walk around in a circle, which pulled the cane through, and the drip went down into a pan, and they made cane syrup from this when they boiled it down. And we'd always play on that pole. It was a pigsty. When you faced the sugarcane mill, there was a pigsty over to the left. We didn't go over there too much because, boy, those critters smelled. And then there was a path back to the fields over to the left, and it had a rut in the middle, so there must have been cars going back there. To where the tracks down. And I think I must have had to say, or I must have said I had to go to the bathroom. Being used to porcelain bathrooms. He led me back to this shack about, I don't know, 30 or 40 yards beyond the house, and opened it up, and inside there was a plank with 2 holes bored into it. And he said, if you got to go, that's where you got to go. So I went in there. And I said, what do you use for toilet paper? And he picked up the Sears catalog that was laying on the board and said, once you look at a page, use that page. But be careful, because you can scratch your bottom on this. So I did my business and feared for my life with wasp nests up there and chickens below me. And we went back up to the house, and I met my grandmother for the first time, my great-grandmother. I was about half as tall as she was. She was a dainty little lady, but one of the sweetest ladies you'd ever meet. And she had skills in the kitchen that can never be met today. She was something. She had an old wood stove. So, I mean, she cooked on a wooden stove, so you didn't have a knob to decide what the temperature was going to be. You had to know what you were doing, know how much wood to put in there. An art in itself, I'm sure. And we had supper that night, and there was so much food on the table, I just couldn't believe it. Just couldn't believe it. And I don't remember if that was Christmas Eve or not. It probably was, because Dad had to work until his shift was over on Christmas Eve. And it was a 2-hour drive to Grandmama's. And I kept asking, are we there yet? Which I know got on his nerves. At any rate, as the sun was going down, I was looking for a light switch, and Clyde just laughed at me and he said, "We don't use electricity lights here." I said, "Well, what we use?" He said, "Come here." So I went over with him and he picked up an old kerosene lantern and he said, "This is what we use here." I said, "Well, where's the switch? How you turn it on?" He said, "You doofus, we don't turn it on. You have to light it." He said, "Wait till it gets dark enough and Grandma will light these up." I said, "Okay." And it was a cold, being December, it was a cold day. Not extra cold in Georgia, but cold enough. They had an old potbelly stove in their bedroom in the middle of the house, and it was on. It was hot. And in the very front room, they had a fireplace. And Granny Kicklighter was making the fire, or put the logs in with however you start a fire with the small chips, and then you add on. But he had that fire going. And I think they already had the Christmas tree in the front, already decorated, packages under it. My memories are kind of going in and out here because I remember one Christmas when Dad took me out to find a Christmas tree, but this wasn't it. I was a little older. I have a scar in the middle of my forehead to remind me of that trip out to get a Christmas tree. I'll have to tell that another day, if I haven't already. But after we ate that night, we went into the front room. And Clyde said to my mother, his sister, "Where are we going to get our stockings to hang on the fireplace, on the mantle?" And she said, "Just a minute, Clyde." She went back and she brought up a couple of socks. Not socks, but Grandmama's old hose. I mean, they were really long. And hung one up on this side and hung one up on that side. He said, "This is yours and this is yours." Point to the two of us. And we looked at those and said, "Is Santa going to fill those completely?" And she said, "Well, that's all we got, so I guess he'll have to fill them up to the top." That was the first thing we looked forward to. And we started to look under the tree at the packages, and my dad said, "Leave that alone until tomorrow." So we didn't mess with that. Now, Clyde, he had a watch. With a glow-in-the-dark dial. And I'm not sure what radioactive metal it was, but radium or something, but it didn't need strong light to be soaked up into it, and then it radiated for a short amount of time. That watch glowed in the dark all night long. I don't know where he got it, but he got it. I think it was a Christmas gift, but somehow he'd gotten it earlier. I don't know. At any rate, there was a grandfather clock in the hall that ticked, tocked, and the folks were just chattering away, and Clyde and I were doing something, playing a game or something. And it started striking 8 o'clock. And the folks looked at us and said, "Okay, boys, it's time to go to bed." And we looked at each other and had this look on our face because we wanted to wait up to see who Santa looked, or what Santa looked like. How he was going to get down the chimney with all that firewood in there just blazing up. At any rate, they took us into the bedroom where it was cold. We had to undress and get ready to get under the covers. And this was my first interaction with a feather bed. So I got undressed, freezing my butt off, so I jumped into bed to get covered up. And I went sinking into that mattress made of feathers down that my grandmother had made. And I sank into it so that my face was below the bed itself. I had to reach my hand up and push it down to get that down back under me. It was soft, but my goodness, I never would have thought that I would have sunk into a mattress like that. Well, they tucked us both in, closed the door, and went back outside. And Clyde said, "Just be real quiet so we can hear when Santa comes." And I said, "Well, that's not going to be for a long time. That's not going to be till after they go to bed." He said, that's true. Maybe we can sleep a little bit and wake up." I said, "Okay, we'll do that." But we were too excited to go to sleep. Santa Claus was coming. I think it must have been my first experience with Santa Claus, especially with Clyde telling me, "Just listen, we'll hear when he comes down the chimney." And I said, "Well, won't he get his feet hot?" He said, "Santa doesn't worry about that kind of stuff. He's just going to come down the chimney and he's going to put our presents under the tree and fill our stockings." I said, "Okay," and we chatted back and forth for a while, and finally we just fell asleep. Next thing I know, Clyde's pushing at me. "Wake up, wake up." Pushing at me, "Wake up. We got to go see if there's anything. It's real quiet out there. Everybody's asleep. Let's go look and see if Santa's been here." So I said, "Okay." We got up, freezing our butts off. Went through the door real quiet like, because we didn't want to wake anybody up. We went over to the tree. Went over to the mantle first, actually. Fire had died down. Clyde said, "See, that's not going to stop Santa from coming down." Looked at the stockings my mother had hung up, and they were just jam-packed with stuff. And I said, Look at all that stuff." And he said, "Yeah, most of it's fruit." He said, "I don't care about the fruit." I said, "Well, guess we better leave that till later, huh?" He looked at his watch, radiating the numbers and everything. He said, "Yeah, it's too early for us to start opening presents, especially when nobody's up. It's not even 5 o'clock yet." So he said, "Well, let's go look and see if we can find our names under the tree." I said, "Well, how are we going to see? It's dark." He pointed at his watch. He said, "We can use this. We'll see." So he did. He took it off his wrist and held it over things, and this little bluish green light flooded I mean, it wasn't real bright, but it was bright enough you could see stuff. And we picked up the packages and looked at the names. Nope, nope. Finally, he got one. He said, "Here's one for me." And he shook it and he trying to figure out what it was. I said, "What about me? Where's mine?" "Oh, hang on," he said. Picked up another one. He said, "This one looks like it's one for you. Here." I did the same thing. I don't know what he was doing. I shook it and looked at it and tried to figure out what could fit in a box that size. And he was doing the same thing. Finally, we said, "Well, Santa's been already. We aren't going to see him, so we might as well go on back to bed because they're not going to get up and let us open presents now. It's too dark." I said, "Yeah, you're right. Let's go back to bed." So we went back to bed. The excitement of Santa kept us awake for a little bit longer, but being kids, we just drifted off again. Next thing we knew, the folks were coming in there and shaking us, say, "Wake up, Santa's been, Santa's been." And we looked at the windows and it was daylight, so the sun had come up. My mother said, "Get dressed, boys, and come out and see what Santa left for you." And we looked at each other and said, "We already know what Santa's given us." So we went out there, and I don't remember anything we got. I mean, there was nothing that I had been looking forward to getting, and I don't think there was anything Clyde was looking. It was just the fact that it was a surprise and there were packages. And Santa had brought them to us. So we went out and grabbed our stockings off the mantle, or had my mother grab mine because I couldn't reach the mantle. And we started unloading them, and Clyde was right. It was bananas, oranges, apples, nuts. I'm like him. I didn't like fruit. What all this fruit for? Kept pulling out all these things, and there was finally at the bottom a little tiny truck or something. So I found out that that was a disappointment to me. And we finally went over to the tree, and my dad was handing out presents to everybody. And Clyde got a couple, and I got a couple. And we opened them up, and we oohed and awed about it. I don't remember what it was, but I know we oohed and awed because the excitement of just getting something in a package was always thrilling to us. And that's really the first Christmas I ever remember. And it was Clyde breaking the rules. Already, we weren't supposed to be up that time of night. We weren't supposed to be looking at things under the tree. But there we were. Yeah, that had to have been the first Christmas I was here. Sorry if I bored you, didn't mean to. But I always go back at this time of year. My cousin Haynes' birthday was in October. I always think of him. And after he passed away, I always think of my aunt. Because every year around Haynes' birthday, she'd get very depressed. And my mother would have to talk to her quite a bit to help her get through that. But then Christmas, Thanksgiving, always at my grandmother's, and always a big feast, and always a joy to see the rest of the family. And then Christmas. From 1950 to 1959, we went to my great-grandmother's house in Georgia for Christmas. And just the trip to Georgia was enough. Didn't have to have presents or anything like that, but it was always a thrill to get a present. But just that chance to spend a few days on my grandmother's farm, sharing the meals that she fixed, they were always tremendously huge and tasty. Oh, that's back when food tasted good. And being a farm, they had choice of beef, pork, chicken, all in the same meal. And biscuits, homemade biscuits, and cream from the milk that they got from the cow, made into butter and just cream itself. And the syrup they made in their own syrup boiler downer. Just the biscuit with some cream on top and then some of the cane syrup. That was a meal in itself and so good. And vegetables, all fresh from the farm, grown out in the fields, or put up in jars. Man, never eaten that good again. Never eaten that good again. I know memory goes into it and makes it taste better, but I'm telling you, my great-grandmother could cook. She was in the kitchen almost all day. And those aromas of everything wafting out into the yard had our mouths watering outside playing. And they had cows and chickens and pigs and 2 or 3 dogs. It was just, to us kids, it was heaven on earth. Always something to do, always somewhere to go, always something. Just a joy to be alive. At any rate, I'd like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas if I don't get on here again. I don't seem to be making as many as I used to. And also, I won't be posting a picture I've drawn of one of the pipe communities posters because I just haven't gotten to it. I've been drawing pretty girls instead, which I kind of enjoyed. But I'm going to go back to posting pictures I've drawn of YouTubers and stick them on the end. So, once again, Happy December. Merry Christmas. Take care. All of you, until the next time, God bless you. Bye-bye.